The rain fell like cold ash over the city, a thin silver mist that turned neon signs into bleeding smudges of color on the wet concrete. It was always raining here, or so it felt to Daniel Ryker as he pulled his jacket tighter around his shoulders. Stepping through the alleyway that reeked of old engine oil, forgotten machines, and desperation. The sprawling human colony on Vesta 9 was supposed to be a beacon of progress, the farthest reach of Earth's tired hands, but to him, it was just another corner of the galaxy where people clawed and coughed and died for promises that never came true. He worked salvage, the lowest rung you could find outside criminal work, digging through wrecks and forgotten tech for anything that still sparked or hummed. His hands were raw from chemicals, his lungs scarred from the fumes. But tonight wasn't about the wrecks. Something had crashed 3 clicks south, beyond the sanctioned salvage zones. People whispered it wasn't human. Daniel didn't care much for rumors, but hunger had a way of making a man curious, and the authorities hadn't locked down the site yet. It could be corporate, it could be alien either way. It could mean credits, and credits meant food, heat, and one more night without freezing in this rain-drenched tomb of a city. The perimeter was easy enough to bypass. The storm covered his tracks, and the fire from the crash still burned bright enough to silhouette the fractured skeleton of the ship against the clouds. It wasn't human-made. The lines were too smooth, the edges too elegant, almost organic in shape, like the hull had been grown rather than built. His boots crunched over glassy shards of strange metal, and static hummed against his skin, prickling along the hairs on his arms. Then he saw her dot at first. Daniel thought she was part of the wreckage, a trick of the shadows and flame, but as his eyes adjusted, the figure stirred, crumpled beside the smoldering remains of the cockpit. Her skin shimmered faintly, a pearlescent sheen like moonlight on oil, and delicate ridges ran along the sides of her face, curling slightly like the edges of petals. Her eyes open and possibly large, luminous with fractured green and gold. Patterns, the kind of eyes that weren't built for Earth's bitter cynicism. She was bleeding. Her silver blood pooled around her, soaking into the fractured soil like molten white, and her breathing came in shallow, sharp gasps. Daniel's heart kicked against his ribs, his every instinct screaming to turn back, report this to the authorities. Walk away before someone decided to erase witnesses. But those eyes, there was fear there, yes, but also something else, desperation, a plea without words. Daniel had seen that look before in the eyes of refugees. The starving, the forgotten scraping by in the underbelly of Vesta 9. It didn't matter that she wasn't human. Pain was universal, and so was fear. He took a cautious step closer, his voice rough from recycled air and sleepless nights. "Hey, easy now," he said, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. The alien flinched, pressing one trembling hand to her side where fractured plates of her exosuit had split, revealing skin beneath that bruised like violet clouds. Her other hand reached weakly toward him, fingers long and thin, faintly glowing. At the tips like bioluminescent threads. Daniel could have left. Should have left. But he didn't. Something ancient and stubborn twisted in his chest. The same reckless humanity that had driven people across void and vacuum for centuries. Hope, compassion, defiance. "I'm not gonna hurt you," he whispered, kneeling beside her, ignoring the sharp, acrid smell of alien fluids and burning metal. The storm raged overhead, lightning forking across the clouds like fractures in the sky. Her lips parted, and the sound that emerged was broken. Raw language layered with musical notes and clicks, beautiful but impossible to understand. Still, her hand gripped his wrist with surprising strength, her expression sharp with fear and pain. She wasn't just hurt, she was hunted. Daniel's gaze flicked over the wreckage. Strange symbols etched along the hull pulsed weakly, and deeper in the shadows. Movement stirred sleek, mechanical shapes like predators, crafted from nightmare blueprints. Whoever brought her down wasn't far behind. He didn't know what she was, where she came from, or why they wanted her dead. But he knew what it felt like to be cornered, to be alone. Daniel gritted his teeth, hooking his arms under her slender frame, ignoring how light she felt, how wrong this all was. He stood, her silver blood smearing against his jacket. "Come on," he muttered, already hearing distant engines cutting through the rain. He gave the alien everything, a choice, a chance, and maybe his life. And in her eyes, shining through pain, there flickered the beginning of something fragile. Something that felt like home. Asterisk, asterisk, Daniel's breath came in short bursts as he stumbled through the rain-soaked ruins. The alien's weight barely noticeable against his chest, yet every step he took felt like dragging a star across his spine. His boots splashed through puddles shimmering with oil and fragments of light. his heart pounding against the inside of his ribcage like a warning siren. Behind him, the crash site crackled and hissed, shadows stalking the edges of the firelight hunters, machines, or worse. He didn't stay long enough to find out which. His instincts screamed this was madness, taking in a wounded alien, harboring something the authorities, or worse, corporate scavengers would dissect without hesitation. That wasn't survival. That was suicide wrapped in reckless empathy. But then there was her, the way her trembling fingers clung to his jacket, the faint glow pulsing weakly along her skin, and the way those impossibly deep eyes locked onto his with a raw, fractured hope that clawed at his bones. Daniel had lived on the edge his whole life. He'd seen too much suffering humans broken by hunger, crushed by the weight of a system that chewed them up for spare parts. But this was different. This wasn't some back alley mugging or a corporate raid. This was something bigger, older, something the universe hadn't warned them about yet. His safe house wasn't much, a forgotten maintenance substation buried beneath the city's lower districts, shielded by layers of rusted piping and flickering security grids. No one bothered to monitor anymore. But it was hidden, quiet, and warm enough to keep death at bay on most nights. He kicked the door open with his heel, slipping inside, sealing the metal hatch behind them as the hum of the city above faded into muffled static. The room was dim, bathed in the dull glow of outdated monitors and aging emergency lights. Wires snaked across the floor like veins, and the stale air reeked of insulation and burnt circuits. It wasn't much, but it was home. He set her down gently on the stained cot in the corner, peeling back the remnants of her shattered exosuit with clumsy, calloused fingers. Beneath the fractured plates, her skin shimmered like pearl mixed with living metal, soft yet impossibly resilient. Her blood still oozed in slow rivulets of silver, glowing faintly where it soaked the fabric. Shit, what the hell are you? Daniel muttered under his breath, grabbing his medkit, the kind salvagers carried for when an engine ruptured or a rusted panel decided to slice through muscle and bone. It wasn't meant for whatever species she was, but it was all he had. She stirred, eyes fluttering open, pupils dilating as they tracked him with exhausted precision. Again, that strange melodic language poured from her lips, softer now, weaker, threaded with something unmistakably universal. Fear, pleading, trust. Daniel sighed, running a hand through his damp hair. You understand me? He asked softly, tapping his chest. Human, Daniel. He pointed to himself, then hesitated, gesturing toward her. You? Her expression flickered pain, confusion, then understanding as she pressed a hand lightly to her chest, fingers splayed. Her voice cracked, delicate as frost fracturing glass. Saran, she whispered, the name curling through the air like a breath of distant stars. Daniel exhaled sharply. Saran, he repeated, the syllables unfamiliar yet grounding. Okay, Saran. You're safe, for now. She winced as he patched the worst of her wounds, the biogel hissing where it met her skin, but she didn't pull away. Her gaze stayed locked on his, unwavering, as though memorizing every line of his face, every crack in his voice, as if that fragile connection was all that kept her tethered to this strange, brutal world. And maybe it was. Outside, the storm hammered. The city, distant sirens wailing like mourning ghosts. Whatever or whoever brought her ship down was still out there, combing the wreckage, hunting. Daniel could almost feel their presence pressing against the edges of his sanctuary, a tightening noose around both their throats. He should have reported her, handed her over, walked away, but the thought twisted his stomach into knots. She wasn't just some strange relic from beyond the stars. She was scared, wounded, and alone. And no matter how far humanity had stretched its reach into the cosmos, Daniel knew one truth better than most. No one deserved to be alone. Hunted and left for dead. His reflection in her eyes wasn't just a human face. It was hope, raw and reckless, but hope nonetheless. And in that storm-drenched silence between them, an unspoken promise began to form, one forged, not in contracts or currencies, but in the quiet language of survival, empathy, and the defiant belief that even across galaxies, kindness still mattered. The hours bled together in the dim shelter as the rain outside softened to a low hiss, washing the city in the endless gray twilight of Vestinine's artificial skies. Daniel sat beside Saran, his back pressed against the cold steel wall, the battered medkit open between them, its contents spread out like a surgeon's afterthought. She was sleeping now, or something close to it, her chest rising and falling in shallow, uneven breaths, her silvery skin no longer gleaming as brightly as when he first found her, but at least the bleeding had stopped. He watched her with a quiet ache in his chest, an ache carved from exhaustion, uncertainty, and a strange, unfamiliar protectiveness. She was beautiful in a way that made his throat tighten. Not human beautiful, not in any way that aligned with the features people on Earth or the colonies might admire. Her face was angular, her features sharp yet delicate, as if sculpted from flowing liquid metal and glass. The faint ridges along her temples glowed softly now, pulsing like the heartbeat of some distant star. Her fragile frame curled against the cot, wrapped in one of his old thermal blankets, her eyes flickering beneath closed lids. Lost in dreams or nightmares he couldn't begin to understand. Daniel wasn't a savior. He wasn't a hero. He was a scavenger, a ghost of forgotten streets, a man surviving on the fringes of society's rotting edges. But in that cramped, rusting safe house, watching her vulnerable form tangled in old blankets and hope, he felt responsible. Bound. To her in a way he hadn't expected. The hours passed and she stirred. Her eyes opened slowly, luminous and uncertain, scanning the cramped room before settling on him. For a moment, neither spoke, trapped in that fragile space between strangers. And something more. Then, tentatively, Sarang lifted her hand, fingers trembling as she mimicked his earlier gesture, tapping her chest gently. "C'est fait," she whispered, her voice broken, fragmented, but laced with determination. Her fingers curled against her chest, her other hand reaching out, hovering hesitantly in the air between them. Daniel's throat tightened. He reached back, pressing his palm gently to hers, surprised at how warm her skin felt, how soft despite the faint bioluminescent sheen. Eyes glistened with unspoken gratitude, raw and exposed like a wound laid bare. In that moment, species didn't matter. Governments, borders, alien languages, all of it dissolved under the weight of shared vulnerability. "You're safe," he murmured, his voice quieter, softer than it had been in years. It wasn't a lie. Not entirely. The power flickered in the safe house, casting brief shadows across the walls as the rain intensified outside, tapping against the metal panels like fingers of fate clawing at the edges. Sayran flinched, her pupils narrowing as her body tensed, the faint glow along her ridges dimming. Daniel noticed and spoke gently, his voice steady despite the storm gnawing at his nerves. "It's okay. Just the grit acting up. Happens all the time." He hesitated, then added, "I've been through worse." Her head tilted, the faintest crease forming between her brows as she studied him, her gaze drifting along the scars, tracing his hands and forearms, the worn patches on his jacket, the exhaustion etched deep into his features. Slowly, with deliberate care, she reached up and traced one of the pale scars along his wrist, her touch feather-light but curious, almost reverent. "You pain," she said softly, her words strained by translation but clear enough to stab through him. Her eyes met his, wide and shimmering with empathy so raw it made him shift uncomfortably beneath its weight. "Yeah," he breathed, his throat dry, emotions stirring beneath the surface like dormant fire. "Plenty of that to go around, sweetheart." A faint smile ghosted across her lips, awkward, unfamiliar, but undeniably there. Her hand lingered against his wrist a moment longer before falling away, curling against her chest protectively. In the silence that followed, Daniel realized how long it had been since anyone looked at him like that. Not with suspicion or pity or transactional indifference, but with understanding. Shared suffering, the invisible kind that threaded through the cracks of existence no matter what planet, species, or language defined you. They were both broken, both running from the same storm of violence and indifference. But here, in this rusting hole beneath the city, two fractured souls from opposite ends of the galaxy had collided, not as enemies, not as curiosities, but as survivors. Daniel let out a breath, leaning his head back against the wall, the faint hum of distant sirens echoing beyond the still walls. "Guess we're stuck with each other now, huh?" he muttered, not expecting an answer. But Zyron's eyes softened, and after a beat, she whispered with quiet certainty, "Home." The word wrapped around him like armor against the storm outside. Asterisk, asterisk. The storm outside was dying, leaving behind streets slick with rain and reflections of neon advertisements that flickered like forgotten prayers. Inside the safe house, the air had settled into a fragile calm, filled with the quiet hum of malfunctioning circuits and the soft, uneven breathing of the alien curled beneath his old blanket. Daniel hadn't slept. He sat slouched against the far wall, eyes heavy, but his mind gnawed endlessly on what he'd done, taking her in, hiding her, patching up wounds that might not even heal the way a human's would. But deeper than the worry, there was a dull weight in his chest, a tension that felt older than caution, as if the universe itself had taken a breath before some inevitable fall. Cyron stirred in her sleep, a low, pained whimper escaping her throat, and for the first time since patching her up, Daniel noticed the faint shimmer of patterns across her exposed skin flickering like circuitry woven into flesh. He leaned forward, his brow furrowing as the intricate lines pulsed faintly, tracing along her arms, her collarbone, vanishing beneath what was left of her suit. They weren't just markings. They moved like data streams, glowing softly beneath. Her skin as though she carried part of a machine inside her. Her eyes snapped open suddenly, wide and alert, her gaze locking onto him with sharp intensity. Her breathing quickened, fingers curling into the fabric of the blanket, and for a second, the bond they'd carefully woven threatened to unravel. Hey, it's okay, Daniel said quickly, holding his hands up, palms open. It's just me. She blinked, her expression shifting from panic to guarded calm. Though her body remained tense, every muscle coiled like a wire pulled tight, slowly. She sat up, wincing as pain rippled through her side, the strange circuitry beneath, her skin dimming and brightening with her movements. Daniel swallowed the questions burning his tongue. Curiosity was a dangerous thing on Vesta 9, poking your nose into things bigger than you often got you killed. But he needed to know. He needed to understand what storm she'd brought to his door. You're not just some crash survivor, are you? His voice was low, cautious, laced with a grim understanding he wasn't sure he wanted. They weren't after your ship. They were after you. Cyron's eyes soft with sadness, the glow of her skin flickering as though dimmed by memory. She pressed a trembling hand to her chest, fingers brushing along the faint glowing patterns. Prototype, she whispered, voice cracking beneath the weight of the word. Daniel frowned. Prototype? Of what? She struggled with the words, her voice layered with musical clicks and warbled tones that twisted into fragile fragments of English. Weapon-living experiment, run. She closed her eyes briefly, jaw clenched tight with grief and defiance. I made escape. They hunt. Daniel's stomach turned. His gaze drifted over her again, seeing now the truth threaded through every shimmer of her alien body, the engineered patterns beneath her skin, the glow of living technology fused into her biology. She wasn't just an alien they'd made. They'd designed her, sculpted her into something more than flesh, more than machine. And then, when the cost of her existence became inconvenient, they hunted her down like a defective prototype tossed onto the cosmic scrap heap. Her hand reached toward him again, trembling with the weight of confession. They erase everything. No witness, no mercy. Daniel exhaled slowly, the pieces falling into place with chilling precision. The crash, the hunters, the distant shadows creeping along the underbelly of the city. They weren't scavengers. They were cleaners, enforcers, whatever corporation or power designed her. They weren't about to let evidence of their sins wander free, his gut twisted with rage and something deeper recognition. Humanity had done the same for centuries, built, broken, discarded. Vesta 9 was full of ghosts like her, except they bled red, not silver. But this wasn't about the past. This was here now, and Cyron was sitting on his cot with fear in her, eyes and blood on his floor. You're saying they'll come for you, he muttered, his voice raw, scraping like rusted steel. For both of us. Cyron nodded weakly, her hand falling to her side as exhaustion tugged at her again. Danger, she whispered, voice cracking beneath the confession. Her eyes met his, pleading but resolute. You safe leave. For a long moment, Daniel stared at her, weighing the safest option turn her in, disappear into the city fog, let the machine devour its own broken pieces. But when he looked at her, shaking, fragile, threaded with wires and hope, he didn't see a weapon. He saw a soul clawing for life in a universe too cruel to care. His jaw clenched, resolve grinding into place like rusted gears. Yeah, he muttered. Darkly, they'll come. His eyes met hers, steady, defiant, human to the core. But you're not alone this time? The city always hummed like a dying machine metal grinding on metal, engines sputtering, neon signs flickering like broken stars. But tonight, there was something different in the air. Daniel could feel it beneath his skin, like static crawling. Along his spine, the storm had passed, but the streets outside pulsed with tension, shadows curling along alleyways, unfamiliar vehicles creeping through the rain-slicked avenues with engines too quiet and lights too dim. They were here. Whoever they were, the hunters, the enforcers, the ones who made Cyron into what she was, and now wanted her erased. They tracked her down, and Daniel's little corner of forgotten steel was no longer invisible. He moved through the safe house with precision, packing supplies into a tattered duffel, checking the battery on his old plasma cutter, the only weapon he had worth a damn. His heart hammered in his chest, not with panic, but with the grim, cold clarity of survival. It wasn't the first time he'd run from men with guns or machines with death stitched into their programming, but it was the first time he'd been running for someone else. Cyron sat on the cot, still wrapped in the thermal blanket, her skin dimmer now, the circuits beneath pulsing faintly like a dying signal. Her eyes tracked him across the room, sharp despite the pain etched into her every movement. She knew, even without words. She could feel it too, the storm wasn't outside anymore. It was closing in, silent, precise, merciless. "You can't stay here," Daniel said, his voice low but firm, stuffing the last of the med supplies into the bag. His gaze flicked toward her, the weight of their impossible situation hanging between them like a noose. "We've got maybe 10 minutes before they sweep this block. If they find you," he didn't finish the sentence. The look in her eyes said she already knew what would happen. Cyron's hands tightened around the edges of the blanket, her jaw set with stubborn defiance. "You run," she whispered, her voice raw with exhaustion and something deeper guilt. "Fear, resignation. Me, stay. You safe." Daniel's chest clenched at the words, bitter laughter bubbling up despite the knot in his throat. "That's not how this works, sweetheart," he muttered, slinging the duffel over his shoulder. "You crash into my world, bleeding all over my floor, turning my life into a target, and you think I'm just gonna ditch you now?" He shook his head, stepping closer, crouching so they were eye level, the faint glow of her skin casting fragile light across his face. "You're not the only one running from something," he added, his voice softer now, but laced with that uncheckable human stubbornness, the same madness that dragged his ancestors across black oceans of space to build cities. "On dead rocks like this one, we survive together or not at all." For a moment, the only sound was the soft hum of failing lights and the distant buzz of approaching engines. Then Cyron's hand reached for his again, trembling, hesitant, but stronger than before. Her fingers curled around his, warmth threading. Through their joined hands, fragile but fierce, Daniel helped her to her feet, slipping his arm around her waist to steady her as they moved toward the service hatch, hidden behind the old maintenance panel. He could hear the search drones, now metallic wings, slicing the air, the low hiss of plasma rifles primed for silence and precision. His heart raced, adrenaline pounding like war drums beneath his skin, but his grip on her never faltered. Slipped into the maintenance tunnels, the walls tight and dripping with condensation. The smell of rust and ozone thick in the air. Daniel's boots splashed through shallow puddles, every step measured, every turn calculated from years, bent memorizing the forgotten veins beneath the city. Behind them, the hunters arrived, faceless enforcers clad in matte black armor, visors glowing faint blue beneath the hissing rain. They moved like shadows, scanning the safe house, weapons humming with lethal energy. Daniel watched from the grate above, his breath held tight in his chest. Cyron pressed close beside him, her skin glowing faintly beneath the darkness. One of the enforcers paused, tilting their head, a scanning drone buzzing past them like a mechanical insect. For a heartbeat, Daniel thought they were caught, but the drone drifted away, deceived by the city's layered noise, their presence masked by years of knowing how to disappear. They moved deeper into the tunnels, winding through rusted arteries. A forgotten infrastructure, their shared silence heavy with unspoken understanding. This wasn't just about hiding anymore. The people hunting Cyron weren't interested in diplomacy or mercy. They were interested in erasure, control, fear, the same forces Daniel had fought his whole life on Vestinine, just wearing newer, sleeker faces. But this time, he wasn't running for himself. Cyron squeezed his hand gently, her eyes meeting his in the dark, glowing softly like stars drowning in rain. "Together," she whispered, her voice thin but resolute, and for the first time in years, Daniel believed in something more than survival. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The tunnels bled into the underbelly of the city, a labyrinth of forgotten sewage lines, ancient wiring, and rusted catwalks hanging above pools of stagnant water that glowed faintly with chemical waste. The deeper Daniel led them, the colder the air became, pressing against his lungs like a warning. His fingers curled tighter around Cyron's waist, feeling the faint tremble beneath her skin as they moved, every step carrying the weight of desperation. Above them, the city pulsed with electric life sirens wailing, searchlights cutting across towering skyscrapers, but down here, the world was quiet, buried beneath layers of concrete and history no one cared to remember. They reached the old relay station deep in the maintenance shafts, a forgotten hub of decaying terminals and cracked screens, wires spilling across the floor like tangled veins. Daniel keyed in the ancient access code, a relic passed down from old contacts. Smugglers who lived and died in the guts of Vestinine, and the heavy blast door groaned open, revealing a small chamber layered with dust and silence. It wasn't safe, not really, But it was time to stop running. Cyran collapsed onto the floor, her strength faltering, silver blood smearing across the metal panels as she leaned against the wall. Her eyes flickered with exhaustion, the glow beneath her. Skin dimming dangerously. Daniel crouched beside her, jaw tight, heart pounding in a way that had nothing to do with fear, and everything to do with the bitter realization clawing at his insides. She wouldn't last much longer. Not like this. Not with those wounds. He pulled the duffel open, rifling through the supplies, his hands trembling with frustration. Nothing here could fix her. Nothing could undo what those bastards had done to her Dot, and then the shadows arrived. The door behind them hissed, heavy boots. Echoing against metal, the faint hum of high-frequency scanners buzzing through the air. Daniel spun, plasma cutter raised, his eyes locking onto the black armored figures slipping into the chamber like wraiths, their visors glowing a cold, inhuman blue. No insignias, no warnings. Just the promise of erasure. The lead enforcer stepped forward, their voice crackling through a synthetic filter, stripped of emotion. Return the asset. Walk away, human. You'll live. Daniel's grip on the plasma cutter tightened, the old tool hissing to life, its tip glowing faint orange with unstable energy. His heart roared beneath his ribs, fear clawing at the edges of his resolve, but deeper than fear, there was rage, raw and burning. They didn't see Saran as a person. She was an asset, a defective experiment, property, and they expected him, a forgotten scavenger from the gutters of Vestinine, to roll over and comply Dot behind him. Saran's breathing faltered, her head slumping. Forward, the circuits beneath her skin flickering weakly. She wouldn't survive another chase. They both knew it. Daniel straightened, the plasma cutter steady in his hand, his voice rough with defiance and something sharper, something human. You made her into this, he growled, stepping in front of her, every muscle coiled with stubborn, reckless resistance. You broke her. You hunted her. You think I'm just gonna hand her back so you can finish the job? The enforcer tilted their head, a faint mechanical click echoing beneath their helmet. She is dangerous. You don't understand what she carries inside her. You're risking extinction for sentiment. Daniel laughed, bitter and raw, the sound scraping against the tension in the room. You built her to be dangerous. But I've seen real danger. I've lived in it. You people with your machines, your arrogance, thinking you own every damn thing that breathes, you're the threat. He took a step forward, the cutter humming louder, unstable energy arcing faintly at the tip. And I'm done running. The enforcers raised their weapons, sleek rifles glowing with lethal intent. Daniel's pulse thundered in his ears, his instincts screaming to stand down, to flee. But when he glanced back at Cyran, her eyes met his weak, flickering but filled with trust. She hadn't given up. Neither would he. The moment fractured plasma fire crackling through the air, the room erupting into chaos. Daniel ducked, the plasma cutter slashing through a weapon, sparks exploding across the chamber. He moved like a cornered animal, driven, not by training, but by raw defiance. Every blow fueled by survival and something deeper, the ancient, relentless human refusal to abandon those who need them. The fight was brutal, short, desperate. The enforcers were faster, stronger, but they underestimated the wild, stubborn brutality of a human with nothing left to lose. Daniel fought with grit, with every scar, every lesson carved into his bones by Universe that never cared. When the last enforcer fell, their visor cracked, circuits sparking, Daniel stood over them, blood in his mouth, chest heaving. His eyes found Saran, slumped against the wall, her faint smile, fragile but radiant beneath the pain. He crossed the room, collapsing beside her, his body screaming with exhaustion, but his grip steady as he cupped her face gently. They won't take you, he whispered, voice trembling beneath the aftermath. I don't care what you are. You're not theirs. Her hand found his, their fingers intertwining warm, shaking but alive Dot and together, beneath the dying hum of machinery and the scent of ozone. They chose to fight for something the galaxy had long forgotten, the right to exist, to belong, to be more than a weapon or a stray fragment of hope. Asterisk. The underbelly of Vestinine was quiet now, save for the distant drip of leaking pipes and the faint crackle of fried circuits smoldering in the wake of the fight. The smell of burnt ozone clung to the air, mingling with the sharp tang of alien blood and human sweat. Daniel slumped beside Saran, his body bruised and battered, every muscle trembling with the aftermath, but his heart was steady in a way it hadn't been for years. His knuckles were raw, his lungs burned, his head ached from the adrenaline crash, but they were alive. Against all odds, they were still here. Cyran leaned against him, Her frame impossibly light, her skin cool beneath the faint shimmer of bioluminescence. The circuitry threaded along her body pulsed weakly, flickering like distant starlight barely. Holding on to life, her breathing was shallow, uneven, every inhale laced with strain, but her eyes, those impossibly deep eyes, were still wide open. Glistening with fragile, stubborn hope, Daniel reached for the medkit again, fumbling through it with trembling hands, frustration curling tight in his chest as he stared down at the dwindling supplies. They weren't enough, not for her. Not for the damage buried beneath layers of living metal and engineered flesh. "Hang in there," he muttered, his voice rough, cracking under the weight of helplessness. "We're not done yet, you hear me? You're not dying down here in this rusted grave." Cyron's hand found his, fingers weak but steady, curling around his wrist with surprising determination. Her head tilted, her expression softening with quiet understanding, even as pain etched itself deeper into her features. "No grave," she whispered, her voice brittle but laced with warmth that cut through the gloom like sunlight slipping through storm clouds. "Home here." Daniel's throat tightened, his vision blurring for a heartbeat as the weight of her words sank in, raw and unfiltered. Home. Not the colony above, not the sprawling, rotting city with its smog-choked skies and hollow promises. Home wasn't metal walls or neon signs. It was this two souls from opposite corners of existence, broken, hunted, defiant, holding on to each other when the galaxy tried to tear them apart. A faint hum echoed through the chamber, the terminal sparking, weakly as dying circuits flickered to life. Cyron's glow pulsed in tandem, her body trembling as the engineered energy within her strained to stabilize. She was fighting, but the damage was deep, maybe beyond repair without the tech they'd left behind at the crash site. Daniel cursed, under his breath, glancing toward the tunnels stretching back into the dark. The enforcers might be down, but more would come. Always more. He could run again, drag her deeper into the city's veins, keep hiding, keep patching wounds with scraps and stubborn hope. But it wouldn't be enough. Not this time, Saren must have seen the decision forming behind his eyes because her grip tightened, her gaze locking onto his with sharp, unwavering resolve. "You gave everything," she whispered, her voice cracking like delicate glass, but fierce beneath the fragility. Her free hand lifted, brushing lightly against his chest, fingers tracing the steady thrum of his heartbeat, the symbol of what made him human, not his scars, not his defiance, but the relentless drum of life refusing to yield. "Now I give." Daniel's brow furrowed, confusion flickering across his face, but before he could speak, Saran shifted, her glowing patterns intensifying, the circuits beneath her skin igniting with new, searing light. Her breathing faltered, her body trembling violently, but her expression held firm, defiant even in pain. "What are you doing?" Daniel's voice cracked with panic as energy coiled from her, weaving like living light between them, threads of shimmering silver and blue connecting their bodies. Saran smiled, a faint, broken, beautiful thing, and for the first time, the weight behind her gaze fully unfurled. "Home, gift, life," she breathed, the words carrying more meaning than translation could hold. Her glow brightened, energy surging through the chamber, racing along the floor, flooding the broken systems with renewed power. The damaged circuits sparked, screens flickered alive, and warmth bloomed across Daniel's chest as the threads of light anchored deep into him, into his bones, his blood, his very being, his vision blurred, heat pulsing through his veins, his body igniting with foreign energy, but beneath it all, there was no pain, no fear, only the overwhelming sensation of connection, of unity. Cyren's body slumped, her glow dimming, her eyes fluttering closed, but not with finality. Her breathing steadied, her skin cool but alive, her pulse faint but present. The energy lingering inside Daniel settled, woven into him like a tether, a gift, a fragment of her engineered resilience now shared between them. Her home given freely, not in walls or machines, but in trust, in sacrifice, in the quiet defiance of hope. Daniel cradled her gently, his body still humming with borrowed strength, his heart aching with fierce, unfamiliar purpose. He pressed, his forehead to hers, whispering into the space between them, raw and resolute. "You gave me home," he breathed, his voice cracking with emotion, "and I'll give you everything." Above them, the city still burned, the storm far from over. But beneath the ruins, two survivors, human and alien, broken and whole, held onto each other, their shared strength burning brighter than the void trying to swallow them whole. And for the first time in his fractured life, Daniel Ryker knew what it meant to belong,